Hi, everyone. My name is Rich Leimsider, and I am the director of the AI for Nonprofits Sprint. And today we're going to share another video use case, an example of how you can use cheap, easily available, off-the-shelf AI tools to make life a little bit easier. We're going to show kind of a niche example today. This is an example of how you can create the syllabus for an entire course. In this case, I dug up a paper that I wrote in college, and I decided to challenge ChatGPT to use only my paper from college and generate an entire semester-long college course based on that resource. So I started uploading the document. I checked its attention to make sure it was able to read it and understand what's going on. Turned out to be a paper about the efforts to create a national health insurance program in the United States in the 1940s and 50s. And then I explain it just like I'm talking to any real colleague. I explain what I'm looking for to my fake colleague. There's no magic formula. There's no prompt engineering here. It's just me trying to carefully describe what I want, just like I would to a very smart new colleague who has never worked with me before and doesn't have a ton of context. I want to teach a 10-session undergraduate college course. I give it a persona, which is one of the strong recommendations. Act as though you're an experienced professor at a liberal arts college. What are some of the considerations as we build the course syllabus? So rather than asking it to jump in immediately, I want it to kind of walk me through its thinking. And by doing that, I can see where it's going. I can course correct. I can maybe point it in the right direction rather than starting from the very beginning saying, write a syllabus. In the same way that if I was working with a colleague who hadn't worked with me very much before, or who had never done this kind of assignment, I wouldn't just hand them my old college paper and send them off for a day and say, bring me back a syllabus. I'd want to have a conversation with them, walk them through it a little bit. In this case, even that preliminary conversation can happen much more quickly, and then we'll see how fast ChatGPT is able to write the curriculum itself. So it says, okay, if you're going to create a syllabus, well, here are some things you ought to be thinking about. You ought to make sure you understand the course objectives. You're going to need to know how to break down the individual sessions over those 10 weeks. And here's some recommendations based on this paper I just read. And then you're going to want to give some reading assignments. You're going to want to have assessments. Maybe you'll do essays, debates, quizzes. Maybe you'll even want to have guest speakers and panel discussions, field trips, all these different things I might think of when I was creating a college course. And then, of course, we're going to want to make sure we do course feedback because, of course, Rich, you're not going to want to launch your college course without making sure you're listening to what the students have to say. Well, that sounds good to me. I've never done something like this before. So I said, great. Using that, go ahead and let's try. Write the full outline of a complete course syllabus based on those factors. And it jumps right into it. With very little guidance, it makes up a title. It says, it actually even makes up a course number, which probably the university doesn't appreciate. Pretends it knows what time we're meeting. And it starts to write the course description, the learning objectives, the required texts. And it gives me a full outline of every single one of the sessions in this college class. It proposes how we might think about assessment and additional course components. Now, for someone who's never written a college class syllabus before, even though there's all sorts of made up information here because I didn't give it details, this could be a pretty good first draft. If I just pasted this over to Microsoft Word, this could be 50% of what I needed to do. And then I could go spend a couple of hours making edits and saying, actually, I didn't want to focus on this. I did want to focus on that. But at least now I have a clear outline and framework. I'm not cursed with that, what they call the curse of the blank page, where if you're trying to do something, particularly something you've never done before, it can be really intimidating to sit in front of a totally blank screen. Now I at least have something to work off of. But because this is AI, there's no reason for the conversation to be over. I can ask it to do more. So I said, great, that's a nice outline, but I actually want to write the full syllabus that I might present to the students. Let's do one section at a time. And it says, great. Let's do a much more detailed version of the course description, the learning objectives, the required texts. Well, you know what? I didn't actually love what it had to say here. I said, you know what? That paper that I uploaded had a bunch of footnotes and a bibliography. So instead of giving placeholders for what we might ask the students to read, go ahead and use the footnotes, use the bibliography in that paper I wrote all those years ago, and use that to build out the supplementary reading section. And by the way, I don't want this course to be about the full history of healthcare. You're kind of misreading the paper I wrote. It's really about that period of time when Harry Truman, in the late 40s and early 1950s, was trying to pass a national health insurance plan. Great. Let me redo that. Here's a new course description, overview. It lists specific readings. These are not, quote, hallucinations that people worry about. These are real books, real articles, because instead of asking it to go search the internet, and who knows what it would have found, I told it to only search a paper I wrote. So these are real footnotes. These are real things I talked about. Proceed. Let's keep doing the rest. Now here's the course outline. For every single session, what should we talk about in each of those 10 sessions? Let's talk about the legacy of Truman's policy efforts. Let's have the synthesis in course 10. Let's update the assessment methods. And the conversation never needs to be over. Now I say I actually want a more fleshed out weekly schedule. Create something that wouldn't be the thing I would hand out to students. Give me something that's more like teacher's notes. What am I going to do when I prepare each week one at a time? Okay, here's week one. Here are the readings. Here are the questions you're going to want to ask the students, and on and on. Here's a specific assignment that you can give the students after week one. Does that for all 10 weeks. Well, it mentioned in one of those things that we're going to give an essay assignment. Again, this conversation with my fake teaching assistant never needs to be over. So let's actually flesh out that assignment I'm going to give the students. And again, you can see I say, give me the topics give me 10 brainstormed topics for what we might ask them to write essays on. Sure, no problem. Remember, all of this is based only on a paper I wrote in college 30 years ago. Write out the instructions for what that essay might be, and on, having this conversation with a teaching assistant in your office to create a college course, if that's something you've been invited to do. Now, this is a specific example of curriculum design, but hopefully you can see how you might adapt this pretty directly to work you might be doing in the K to 12 teaching space, or if you've been invited to do an adult learning program at a local library, or to teach your fellow colleagues how you do something in the workplace. You could sit down with your fake teaching assistant, give it background, and just have a conversation. And even if you have that conversation over 30 minutes, it's not the kind of instant use of AI that only takes a minute or two. But if you did this for 30 minutes, you might wind up with something that would have otherwise taken you several hours or even days to get done. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you on another video.